So a tube is one of my mainstay baits for fishing this way. I'm going to use a natural color. If you don't know what color to fish, just try to get a color that blends in with the surroundings that you're fishing. So if you can see down in the water and see what color the bottom is, get a tube color that's close to the same color as the bottom you're fishing. Why you want to do that is because whether it's a crawdad or a little shiner or a little bluegill, you know, what the fish is going to be feeding on, they are just like a chameleon in clear water. They're going to blend in with their surroundings. So if there's brown rocks, the bait fish and the crawdads are going to be the same color. So that's how I'm going to choose my baits. That's why you see a lot of watermelons and pumpkins and smoke colors, because those are very natural to the bass. The clearer the water, the more important that color is. Now, if you're fishing in dirty water, it's a whole different situation. You know, I want to pick colors that are more visible. You know, a black tube silhouette's probably better than any other color in dirty water. So if you're fishing out the river and flipping a tube in shallow water, a black and red tube or a black and gold color, it's going to have a lot of flash. It's going to be very visible to the fish. Clear water is where very natural is important. But again, that whole technique is just working it with slacking the line, and by popping it like that and then letting it fall back to the bottom, I can fish pretty quick and cover a lot of water the same way I would with a spinnerbait or a crankbait. You know, if I'm fishing real clear water like this, usually I go with a smaller worm. You know, smaller profile is more natural in that situation. But when you fish a shaky head rig and you're fishing it rigged properly, you just thread it on the jig head and hook it so it's weedless. This rig is designed so that the worm stands up on the bottom. What I really like to do with this rig is anytime I've got a situation where I've got a clean bottom area, you're fishing hard bottom, the outside edge of a weed line where the sand is at, or rocks, things like that, gravel, hard bottom, clean bottom areas, it's hard to beat a shaky head. And what I'm going to do with it is cast it out there, same thing, let it hit the bottom with no tension on the line, let it sink all the way down. A lot of bites are going to come on that initial fall. A shaky head has a really good natural fall to it. And then I'm just going to shake it. They call it a shaky head for a reason. You just want to kind of shake it along the bottom. And I like to pull it along. And what happens is every time you pull it, it makes the tail of that worm kind of stand up and have a lot of action to it. And that jig head pushes a lot of mud and silt and gravel and stuff on the bottom. If you got thick grass, it hangs up in it a lot. This is not a good rig for fishing around a lot of vegetation. But if you got open areas, hard bottom, it makes a lot of noise, and it's something that you can cover a lot of water with. Again, I'll shake it along a few feet, then I'll reel it a little bit, and then let it fall again. Again, you don't have to fish these baits slow. If you've got a spot that you catch a bass or two off of, a little rock point or something like that where you know there's one at, that's a great place to slow down and really work that shaky head slow. There's not a bait I got in my tackle box, a finesse bait, that I think is as effective as a shaky head. I know there's a bass right there. But just because it's designed to fish slow doesn't mean you always have to pull it slow. I'm going to move it along a little bit quicker, let it sink back to the bottom, and fish it slow again. That way, a cast doesn't take 3 or 4 minutes. I'm going to get out there. Again, I'm looking for these bass. I'm going to shake it a little bit, move it along. If one doesn't bite it, I'm going to reel it up a little bit, drop it back down. I'm not afraid to snap it, dart it the same way with that tube. That worm has a lot of action built into it. Just because it has a straight tail doesn't mean that it doesn't have a lot of action. It has a lot of dart, a lot of movement, and it's very erratic. So those are the kind of presentations that I really like. Again, I like to throw all these on spinning equipment, use a nice, I like a large spinning reel that has a bigger spool. The last thing I like when I'm out there fishing is to get a lot of tangles and a lot of twists. And a larger reel like this will handle that line a lot better. For all these techniques, I really like to use fluorocarbon line. Usually I'm using 6 or 8 pound test line, and you know, with the fluorocarbon it has a lot of sensitivity, and the beauty of fluorocarbon is the fish just can't see it. It doesn't reflect light like monofilament does, and it disappears in the water. They don't see it. The smaller diameter line really enhances a lot of the action when you're snapping those baits through the water, and it really makes a big difference. So I've got a nice long rod so I can make a long cast, a nice light line, a big reel that helps me cast far too. And when I set the hook on a fish with this rig, the one thing that's very it's easy to do, it's something that you want to just immediately when you feel that bite, you want to drop down and you want to set the hook. With this rig right here, I almost never set the hook on the bass. I found that if I just pull into the fish and reel, then I'll catch a lot more. If I jerk, a lot of times you get a little bit of slack in the line, and that bass will come up and jump and throw your bait, especially smallmouth bass. They're notorious for biting down really hard on your tube or your shaky head or your drop shot that you can't hardly move that bait in their mouth. They'll bite down in that tube, you set the hook, they'll come up and jump and throw it the first time. So when I get a bite, all I do is just start reeling as fast as I can. I'll just start reeling, and that takes all the slack out of the line. Let the rod bend over and load, and then just pull into the fish. That's all you have to do. We call it reel setting. If you'll do that, when you get a bite, instead of jerking, just reel, let the rod load up, pull into them. You're going to land about 99% of the fish that you have. These hooks that we have today, you know, that Mustad Ultra Point hook is so sharp that it's going to start penetrating when you reel and pull pressure into them. Pulling it in just puts it past the barb, and those fish can't jump and throw it anymore. So I'm going to always reel set when I'm fishing these light duty rigs like this. But the action of those trails, the trailer on the back, is really what draws them out. So again, if I got a lot of thick cover, that 1/4 ounce size, and I'll cast it out there, and I might just fish it right along the top, just like this, almost like you would a buzzbait or a frog. That 1/4 ounce jig will swim at a nice slow speed, and you can throw it through lily pads and grass and stuff like that if you have to, or open water like this. I got a 1/2 ounce jig tied on right now. I can cast it out there, hold my rod tip down, just with a nice steady retrieve. It's going to run 5 or 6 feet down. And I'm going to get a lot of bites just reeling it in a straight line like that. And I just like to experiment with different retrieves. If I don't get bit with a steady retrieve, one of my favorite things to do with it, especially around the spawn, I see this a lot, is I want to add, or just really a shake swim retrieve. So I'll just cast it out there, and the whole way back, I'm just constantly shaking the rod tip, just like this. Just constantly shaking it, and just twitching the jig the whole way back. So it's just kind of moving in short little twitches all the way back to the boat. If I'm throwing the jig up in real shallow grass and cover like that, I may hold the rod tip up and do it right on the top like that, just kind of swimming it along with those real short twitches. But it's a really unique technique. It's very simple, but it's amazingly effective. I've caught a lot of bass in a lot of tournaments. You know, when I thought that the spinnerbait was the best deal, you go down a bank and catch 3 or 4 with a spinnerbait, go right back down it with a swim jig and catch 3 or 4 more. So, and it works equally effective on smallmouth as it does largemouth, which is really good.